DW Africa Link.
Are the police involved in crime in South Africa? I know it sounds like a strange question. After all, their job is to maintain law and order and prevent crime, right? But scandal after scandal involving top police officials, from commissioners to crime intelligence chiefs, has raised serious doubts. The recent prosecution and suspension of the National Police Commissioner has been the tipping point. So what's really going on? And is there a way out? That's what's coming up. I am Eddy Micah Jr., and you are welcome to Africa Link, the podcast connecting you to the stories that matter.
Africa Link, every weekday here on DW.
South Africa has one of the world's highest violent crime burdens, and its police service has long struggled with corruption, brutality, weak investigations, and political interference. Those problems are not new. But when it reaches into the top ranks of the South African police service, then it's a systemic problem, isn't it? The situation has broken the public's trust and allowed criminal syndicates to operate with almost no consequences. Let's dig into the matter with our very own Nontokozo Mchunu, DW correspondent in South Africa. I also have David Bruce, independent researcher on policing and consultant to the Institute for Security Studies. Hello, welcome to Africa Link. Nontokozo, tell us more about why corruption at the top level of police is back in the spotlight.
Obviously, what has happened started last year in July, on the 6th of July, when the now famous Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, through a media briefing, alleged that there's very deep rot within the South African police services and that top cops are involved in criminal syndicates and the protection of big criminal bosses. And I think one of the, big blows was him alleging that the now suspended police minister, Mchunu, is also somehow involved in shielding criminal syndicates and also just protecting organized crime groups, senior politicians, and criminal justice officials. So obviously this was a very surprising thing for everyone in the country. Everybody was shocked, all sorts of emotions really. And we awaited for the president's response, and eventually he addressed the nation regarding that July 6 media briefing. He then established a commission of inquiry headed by Justice Mbuyiseni Madlanga, as well as a parliamentary ad hoc committee to investigate. And ever since then, we've just been hearing testimonies from the Madlanga Commission that are just really jaw-dropping and really revealing how far and deep the rot goes. At the center of all these allegations is this big scandal of a 360 million rand fraudulent contract, which is almost $22 million US, by the way, which was awarded or is linked to a businessman called Vusimuzi Ket Matlala, who has now also become famous as a criminal who's currently arrested for the attempted murder of his girlfriend, alleged at this point, as it's still an ongoing case.
Right. Thank you very much, Nonto, for giving us that sort of breakdown and timeline. And I think there's just been so many different cases or allegations that, to be honest, we could have gone on for hours trying to see how we got here. But I'm going to come straight to you, David. First, if there's any clarification you need to make from Nonto's submission, but also, what does this really say about how deep the cracks are when it comes to crime in South Africa, David?
So I think the one thing that it's important to make note of is that, there have been, people who've been expressing concerns and talking about police corruption in South Africa for a long time. And for instance, if you look at the South African Police Service that's repeatedly, developed strategies, at least on paper, to supposedly intended to respond to the problem of police corruption. And so also, I think what's important to emphasize is that this process that has been taking place so far, and particularly the Madlanga Commission process, is virtually exclusively focused on digging deeper into the allegations which, as Nontokozo mentioned, were made by Lieutenant General Mchunu in his press briefing in July in 2025. So we aren't actually currently in the process of, we don't currently have a general investigation into police corruption in South Africa. And so many facets of the problem of police corruption in South Africa are not currently being, examined. But what has emerged is, what appears to be evidence that a network of role players involved in organized crime had begun to establish quite a lot of influence over significant role players in the senior leadership of the SAPS. Particularly so that the SAPS is a very large police organization. The total number of personnel is in the region of 180,000 people. But and it's quite a complicated organization. It's organized at national and provincial level with different divisions and so on. But it seems that the one particular point of influence that these people had begun to establish was over senior figures in the kind of detective service, in the police investigative system.
What really does it mean if corruption and crime has reached such high levels? I mean, look, the duty of the police or security systems is, one, to prevent crime in the first place, maintain law and order. But if there's no law and order at the top, then, David, what are we talking about?
Well, the broader problem that we're talking about is a chronic problem in South Africa of elite corruption, which, incorporates, people, I don't want to overgeneralize, so I'm not, trying to suggest that everyone is corrupt or anything like that, but large numbers of people amongst the political class, and with the cooperation of senior public servants, and then in the private sector, sections of the private sector are then have been consistently linked to forms of corruption, particularly related to corruption of within the state's procurement system. And so currently there's an endless list of so, for instance, simultaneously, South Africa does have investigative mechanisms which have been uncovering a lot of this corruption. And so, notably, we have a body called the Special Investigating Unit. And there's, there's a whole litany of investigations that have been carried out by the Special Investigating Unit over the last, 20 or 30 years, which have uncovered a large number of manifestations of elite corruption, particularly within, involving the abuse of state funds and the public procurement system. And so, on the one level, it seems that you could see that at the highest levels, corruption in the SAPS is in some ways associated with this general pattern of elite corruption. But then obviously where you have, a situation where you have a police service where the senior leadership are, believed to be involved in corruption, or when many people at senior leadership level are believed to be involved in corruption,
Well put, David. And that is exactly the problem, isn't it, Nonto? Because if I'm South African listening to David and what you also said earlier, I mean, how much trust is there still within the police? I mean, do I still trust the police?
That's very difficult currently. We knew that there is corruption because it's something that has been an issue for a very long time now in South Africa. And so I think already there were issues of trust with the police. But I think what we didn't know are the details. South Africans feel they do not trust the police anymore. It's very difficult to do that. And I think already in the lower levels, people just had no faith in the policing system because so many crimes that were reported were just left unattended or unresolved.
David, what do you expect the government to do now?
Alongside the fact that there is this commission of inquiry, so there have been two parallel processes. There's been a parliament established an ad hoc committee to look into these allegations, and currently they're in the process of trying to finalize the report of that inquiry. But then the Madlanga Commission has until the end of August to submit its final report to the president. And so the president, as I think Nontokozo says, has said that he intends to be guided by the Madlanga Commission in how he addresses these the issues that are currently being investigated. But at the same time, it's also worth making note of the fact that there are also investigative units. So there's a dedicated investigative unit that has been established within the police service to follow up on the cases that are being highlighted by the Madlanga Commission. And so there's at least a handful of people who have been arrested related to investigations that have been initiated as a direct result of the Madlanga, of evidence that's been presented before the Madlanga Commission.
Right, David. But knowing all that we know now, why should people trust these investigations, especially from the police side?
That's a good question. And so I think, obviously there's a tendency to be suspicious and doubtful as to whether the current policing system is capable of, carrying out any investigations that are informed by, basic principles of the rule of law, and that, everyone is accountable before the law. But so, for instance, right at the moment, we do have a situation where the national commissioner, the head of the SAPS, has been suspended and is facing specific charges. And so, I think, the one thing about South Africa is that the picture that is often one which is quite complex and contradictory. On the one hand, we do have, evidence of the criminal justice system being compromised and undermined. On the, and there's a lot of suspicions and allegations flying around. On the other hand, we do, also at the same time see situations where, these mechanisms they do hold senior people, bring them before court, and so we have, for instance, had national commissioners who have been charged in the past and at least in one case convicted of serious criminal charges and sentenced to imprisonment. Though one might say that the legal system has greater difficulty in subjecting people who senior members of the political elite to the same kind of scrutiny.
Right. I mean, it just sounds to me, David, that it's going to take a long time to rebuild that trust, isn't it?
Yeah, well, you see, I mean, the issue of trust also can't be reduced to a question about police corruption. I think, for some time now, there's been a problem of low levels of trust in the police. And so, corruption is one of the problems facing the South African policing system, but there's a broader problem about how to build a policing system and a criminal justice system which enjoys greater public credibility. And so, because the problems of public trust and confidence in the police and criminal justice system are, as I say, not only about corruption, but, for instance, also there are serious questions about the effectiveness of the criminal justice system. So, for instance, right at the moment, we have extraordinarily low levels of clearance rates for instance, murder investigations. Currently, the police statistics are that they're solving something in the region of 12% of murders each year. And so, there seems to be a lot that needs to happen in order for us to, create a policing system which is more trusted by members of the public.
Let me hear from Nontokozo on this one. What do you really expect to see from the police service or the presidency to rebuild the trust? I would assume your trust for the police has gone down a bit also, Nonto, right?
I mean, yes, I think the issue of trust, as David said, it has been present for a while. And I just think that what has happened since the July 6th media briefing by General Ntantla Mkhwanazi has just made it even worse. What would need to happen? It's a very difficult question to answer, Eddy, but I think what I have heard people saying is, or asking, why has the president not fired the suspended minister, Senzo Mchunu, as a way to reassure South Africans that, he is serious about dealing with the issues of corruption, and because he's obviously tainted at this point. And so many feel that he needs to be a bit more decisive in his decisions and how he handles the situation. Obviously now he's back with the ANC. He says, okay, some say, then why? Because you have the power as the president, even though the investigations are not yet done, why do you not just get rid of him? But he's adamant that he wants the process to come to an end first. So it's very difficult. I think a lot of people would probably feel like they can rebuild trust if something like that happened, where they saw someone like Minister Senzo Mchunu being fired. But I think it's difficult to answer exactly what would rebuild the trust.
Right. There are those known to that have called for some sort of total overhaul of the police service. What more can you tell us about that, and how is that debate going?
I guess that is a very difficult thing to do. I think that would take quite a lot. But yes, there are people who believe that that is the only way forward and the only way to clean up the system, because they feel like there's too much rot. And so getting rid of a few doesn't necessarily mean that the left are not in any way part of the problem. But where do you even begin to do that? How do you do that? I think it's a very difficult ask from the people. I don't know how it would work. But yeah, there are definitely those people who believe that that's the only way to rebuild the trust.
Right. I mean, fair point. You and I have no idea what it even means for a total overhaul of the police service. So let's go to David to wrap it up with this one. David, what would that even mean? What would that look like? And is that one of the ways forward?
Right. Well, a preliminary point is also just, it's worth just making a note of the fact that, as in many countries, and let's call it many democracies, there is this broader problem of kind of alienation from the political system. So, when we're talking about, for instance, surveys of public attitudes to the police and so on, which reveal that there's low levels of public trust in the police might, also be a manifestation of broader issues to do with, democratic systems and how they, create a greater sense of kind of inclusivity amongst the majority of people. On the question of, police building trust in the police, I mean, it's something that, as part of my work with the Institute of Security Studies, we've looked into.
Especially with the topic of overhauling the police. I'm sure you've been hearing and probably dealing with that. What would that look like? Is that even feasible?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's not something that can be done overnight. So, we have looked into the issue. The one thing that we've found is that when you speak to people about the issue, there's a wide range of problems with the policing system that people raise. And so, it's obviously wouldn't be possible to resolve all of those issues at the same point. And so what we've argued, is that one needs to initiate a type of strategic process where one, tries to hone in on, critical elements of the SAPS and the policing system in order to start to turn things around. And, that might include things like the recruitment system. So, for instance, the current system of recruitment is largely focused on bringing people into the police who have a school education. And so, there's a question about how to bring on board more people with higher levels of education and skills. But obviously, the one critical thing that comes up repeatedly in conversations about, turning around the police is this question about police leadership. And so, so South Africa's now had a sustained problem. So, the one manifestation of it is that not one of the people who has been appointed as the head of the police, the national commissioner, since 2000, has completed their term of office. All of them have been removed on the basis of a lack of confidence in their performance or some other some allegations that they were facing. And so so there's questions about the top leader of the police, but there's a question about establishing a much more efficient kind of executive management system at the top, because it seems that the current structures, it's not only a question about the personnel, but the way in which the current leadership system is structured is also is not very effective.
Right. That's a good dissection of the matter, and really throwing the spotlight on how challenging it is. But little drops of water make a mighty ocean, they say. So step by step, if there is the will from the government side, hopefully the next time we talk will be, wow, there's been such a revamp of the police service and trust is slowly coming back. Definitely very insightful conversation we've had. Thank you very much, Nontokozo Mchunu and David Bruce. Nontokozo is our correspondent in South Africa, and David Bruce is an independent researcher on policing and consultant to the Institute for Security Studies. Thanks very much to you both.
Thank you very much, Eddy.
Yeah, thanks. Enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Policing only works when people trust it, right? But when police leaders themselves are accused of corruption, that trust collapses. People doubt arrests, investigations, and operations, even genuine ones. South Africa is already battling serious crime, and when the police are weakened from the top, the state's ability to respond is compromised at the worst possible time. And beyond South Africa, it raises a bigger question for the continent. What happens when criminal networks start to influence security institutions? Think about that for a second. Meanwhile, share your thoughts with us on Facebook at DW Africa. Listen on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And subscribe to our DW Africa YouTube channel so you never miss an episode. This show was co-produced and edited by Isaac Kaleji. And I am Eddy Micah Jr. Thanks for listening.
DW. Made for minds.